So one question that keeps reoccurring under my videos and during my live streams is, what are my thoughts on crop circles? Obviously, crop circles, a key cornerstone almost of the UFO and alien phenomenon, tracing all the way back to the X-Files. So it is a fascinating phenomenon. It seems like it's one of the big mysteries of our time. So in today's video, I want to kind of do a deep dive on the crop circle phenomenon. I will offer answers for key questions like how are they created? What about the radiation levels that have been measured inside, or the differences between the crops inside and outside the crops? And what about the famous footage of orbs creating crop circles? Is there something to it? Is it possible that some crop circles have been created by aliens or some kind of paranormal force? Now, when we look at crop circles, they often have incredibly intricate shapes, right? Which are seemingly impossible to create overnight in a crop field. They almost always follow mathematical patterns, so the patterns can be traced back to mathematical equations or fractal designs like in this example here. We've seen examples like this one that seem to link us directly to alien life and hold messages that seemingly can be decrypted. Here's another famous example that seemingly adapts the Arecibo message, which is an interstellar radio message carrying basic information about humanity that we sent out into space in 1974, and it's been adapted into this crop circle that you see on the left-hand side here. But then there are also other countless examples of crop circles being used for commercial purposes to create advertising, where brands work with crop circle makers who basically establish this as a business to promote their brands. One example of that is the UK arts collective Circle Makers, which was founded by Rod Dickinson and John Lundberg. And it has been creating crop circles in the UK and around the world as part of its art practice and also for commercial clients. So there are those examples as well. But let's take it one step at a time. In the beginning, I want to focus on this very famous video that is called the Oliver's Castle crop circle video. That is a video that was recorded in 1996 near Oliver's Castle, which is in South England. Actually, funny enough, not that far away from Stonehenge. The original footage was allegedly recorded by a man called John Whaley. I'm going to play it for you guys, and I'm going to link it in the description as well, so you can go check it out yourself. And it shows a bunch of white orbs flying over a crop field. And as they're flying over it, the crop circle just creates itself, right? It seems like there are some kind of paranormal forces at work here, which really stimulated the whole alien theory. People were claiming that this is, as the title of this video does as well, that this is the only real footage / recording of a formation of a crop circle. So again, this footage is called and titled the Oliver's Castle crop circle footage. It's the only footage that shows how a crop circle is allegedly being created, not man-made, but by aliens or these white orbs, whatever they may be. Now, when this footage first surfaced, people were intrigued, okay? Some people blindly believed it and they wanted to be on board with what we're looking at here. This is, by the way, the result of the circle. It's fairly simple, but because people wanted to find out what's going on here, they actually at the time hired a private investigator to find out what's going on with John Whaley, and is there reason to believe that he just by chance recorded something so impactful like this. So this article talking about exactly those circumstances said the story of the video began in August 11th, 1996, when the UK was in the grip of a crop circle frenzy. A man calling himself John Whaley claimed to have filmed the startling footage this morning, the footage we just looked at. Suspicions it may not be real were aroused by the poor quality of the snowflake crop circle that was actually in the field, according to researchers. So the crop circle itself didn't look that great, so people were suspicious that it might not be authentic or real. The video was later looked at by investigators and field discrepancies were found on the video, suggesting that at some point the video had been rendered as an animation sequence. Okay, keep in mind, we're in the year 1996. All you can really do when you want to animate something like this, you can't do it all digital like you could do today. You would use frame-by-frame animation to create an effect like this, and they were able to prove that there are traces of that kind of process within this footage. According to Lee Winterson, a crop circle researcher involved in the case from the start, who exposed it as a hoax in an article on robertscotch.net. A private investigator was hired, and John Whaley was discovered to actually be John Wabe, okay, an employee of a Bristol animation studio. So not only did they find traces of this sequence that we just looked at being rendered as an animation at some point, the man who allegedly filmed it changed his name that he used to publish this footage, and he used to work for a Bristol animation studio. That's not good. Mr. Wabe is even reported to have made a video confession that it was all a hoax filmed on location at Oliver's Castle. Now that confession video, I looked everywhere, it seems to not exist. It's claimed here that it exists somewhere, at least on the internet, and through my research I could not get my hands on that particular confession video. But to be honest, him changing his name, the evidence of animation in the footage, him working for a Bristol animation studio, I mean it's pretty damning. Even we could not find his confession video. So I would say that the Oliver Castles video is probably most likely not authentic as much as I like it. But beyond that, there are other people who have come forward, also in the 90s, when, one can argue that the crop circle craze was at a high point at that time. Two men called Bauer and Chorley confessed to creating the first crop circles in the south of England. They confessed to that in 1991. Bauer and Chorley confessed to making over 250 formations, and them creating these formations really spawned a whole wave of copycats, not just in the UK, but around the world. And it also led to this ambition of people to create more and more elaborate patterns. In this great article released in 2011 in Physics World, they are writing, and I quote, "After Bauer and Chorley announced their hoax, the pictographs they created inspired a second wave of crop artists. Far from fizzling out, crop circles have evolved into an international phenomenon with hundreds of sophisticated pictographs now appearing annually around the globe. Although up to half of each year's crop circles are in England, formations also occur elsewhere in Europe, as well as in North and South America, Russia, Australia, Japan, and India. Artists who readily admit to have made crop circles in the past say they do not know who is responsible for all of today's masterworks. And this is partly because many crop circle artists have followed the conventions established by their predecessor, creating their pictographs anonymously under the cover of darkness and leaving the scene free from human traces." Which I find really interesting, right? Because there seems to be this almost unspoken code amongst crop circle artists, which is you create your pictograph secretly at night under the cover of darkness, you leave without any traces. And I think hidden in that ambition is almost the reason why these people create these very elaborate and ambitious patterns. Think about it this way. People make graffiti, right? We see graffiti everywhere. I don't know about you here in the UK and in Germany. Graffiti is everywhere. It's created every day. It's created next to busy roads, in train yards. And I mean, these are either highly monitored spaces like train yards or very busy places where cars drive by on busy roads. And we still get all this graffiti, and rarely people get caught or are being seen doing those. Crop circles, on the other hand, happen in fields. Crop circles happen at night in areas where there's almost no light, right, in crop fields, in a very remote location that nobody oversees at night. There's nobody there, so you will have much more time to create these elaborate patterns and plan how you're going to go about it. And now, how are these crop circles actually created? Now, we do know that some of them that we see are very elaborate, right? For example, we get classic ones like this one, which is a so-called triple Julia design. And it's based on an equation that was formulated by Gaston Julia in 1918. It's a fractal design, and as it says in this article here as well, which by the way I'll link in the description as well, it's a very interesting read if you're into crop circles, but they say as well, like, it's very elaborate. It's not easy to trace a pattern like this, as perfect as you see it here, into a cornfield. It has been trying to replicate by scientists, and it took them hours and hours just to map the basic structure into the corn. So by no means is it easy. But what we can witness is that just a few weeks before this triple Julia crop circle we just looked appeared in the field, in the same area, a single Julia crop circle appeared. So you can see it here, right? It's just a singular circle pattern that's obviously also based on this fractal design. And it's almost like a warm-up circle. It's a warm-up design for the bigger piece. So you can actually see these crop circle artists going out, practicing their pattern, creating a smaller version first, practicing how they lay out this single Julia design on the crop field, only to then a few weeks later come back into a different field and then do the triple Julia one. So all this coming together really seems to paint a strong indicator that it's pretty much all man-made. Now, I can't speak for every single crop circle that's out there. Some of them are obviously very elaborate and sophisticated, and it would be incredibly difficult to map something like this onto a cornfield. So it does raise the question, why are people doing that? If it is so difficult and so challenging, why would people be doing this? Well, I'll get to that by the end of the video and talk about it in my conclusion. But first, I want to briefly talk about the radiation, right? Because we keep getting these rumors and these stories that high radiation, more than outside the circles, has been measured inside the circles, and that there's a difference between the crops inside the circles and outside of them, where researchers have claimed that these so-called pulvinis, right, which are these small joint-like swellings that sit on the base and on the stems of plants, are actually swollen or inflated, as you see it here, and that they are different inside the crop circles than they are on the outside. Now, these claims that there is a difference between the crops inside the circles compared to the outsides trace back to a small number of scientists. By no means is this like a commonly accepted theory. I mean, there are mainly two scientists or researchers who are responsible for making these claims. One is Elcho Hasselhoff and the late biophysicist William Levengood. I'm sure there are more, but those are the two people who are mainly responsible for making these claims, doing the research on these crops being different inside than outside the circles, also talking about the radiation. But if you look at this in a bit more depth, you'll find out that especially Levengood's claims have been reviewed by other researchers who exposed inconsistencies in his methods and highlighted that his findings have never been peer-reviewed. For example, here is an investigation by another researcher of his findings, of Levengood's findings. I'll link this article down in the description as well, but it is only available with the Wayback Machine. Unfortunately, it is not available as it sits here on the current form of the internet, but you can still open the link and look at it. And Joe Nickel writes, unfortunately, there are serious objections to Levengood's approach. First of all, while he uses variation-controlled plants for his experiments, nowhere in the paper I reviewed, 1, 2, 3, and 4, is there any mention of the work being conducted in double-blind manner, as so to minimize the effects of the experimenter bias. As one serologist, the Earl of Haddington, said of another laboratory that claimed to detect different energy levels between crop circles and non-crop circle areas, a concept that appears to have begun with dowsers, when they are not told which sample came from crop circles and which from the heap of a grain in my backyard, they are either unable or unwilling to give a result. The question of bias is important, since Levengood's attitude and assumptions reveal him as a partisan crop circle believer of the Terence Medan ion plasma vortex variety. Alice Medan, who wrote several articles and books advocating the vortex hypothesis, was increasingly forced to conclude that great numbers of crop circles, especially the elaborate pictograms, were produced by hoaxers, and he reportedly abandoned interest in the subject. Levengood's colleague John A. Burke seems particularly defined towards alleged hoaxes, as if there were not powerful evidence that most probably all of the crop patterns were man-made. And it continues a little bit more. It's an interesting read, but it really pulls into question what really was Levengood's motivation in this. But let's assume for a second that it's true, right? There is this research group, like a crop circle research group called BLT Research Team, and they actually have been able to recreate the effect of the changes to the pulvini, the little joint-like swellings I showed you earlier that you find on plants. What they did is they exposed crops for 30 seconds using a magnetron that is available in just commercially available microwave ovens. So they used a 12-volt battery to power this magnetron. They mounted it or held it about 4 meters above the center of a crop circle, and once that crop was heated using this source, the crop could be sculpted easier, speeding up the process of the crop circle creation. So I find this very fascinating. I'm not saying that Hasselhoff's or Levengood's claims that there is a difference between the crops inside the circle and outside of them are categorically wrong, but as this research group found out, if you use a magnetron that is widely available in a certain way, it actually makes the crop easier to sculpt. So it is possible that the people who produce these crop circles, the artists, have developed a method to use these magnetrons in order to make their work go faster, in order to potentially achieve better results. It's just a theory, right? But I find it very, very fascinating, and it would explain why there is a difference in radiation inside the circle and outside the circle. And it would also explain why these pulvinis, these joint-like swellings on the plants, look different. So it's an interesting theory, but I would love to hear your thoughts on this. Do you think Levengood's research is completely pointless and there is no actual difference between crops in and outside the circles? Or do you think it might be something that links to this radiation technique to shape the crop easier and speed up the work of those crop circle artists? But in conclusion, right, if you still believe that crop circles are real and that some crop circles may actually be made by extraterrestrials, That's fine, you know, everyone is entitled to their opinion, but I would appeal to your sense of logic there as well, right? Because there are, in my opinion, just a few very obvious general logical challenges to this idea. One of them being that, like, I mean, think about it this way. Aliens traversing thousands, if not millions of light years through space. And then they arrive on this planet, and what they do is they paint a cryptic pictogram in a cornfield. Do you know what I mean? It just doesn't make much sense. And beyond that, you can look at the location of these crop circles. As we said earlier already, a majority of them appear in England. And not only that, but they're very localized. Most of them happen down here in the south of England. Not all of them, right? Fair enough, but a vast majority appears always in the same area. And I mean, that in and of itself strongly indicates that there is a passionate group of people who have developed methods and have trained over years to create these formations in an efficient and a fast way, trying to create something that feels like it's larger than life and it could not possibly be made by humans. And that leads me seamlessly into my conclusion. I teased it earlier, like, why would humans do it? Right? What's the motivation for people to do this? And I think, this is my theory, I'm just speculating at this point, humans love mysteries. Humans love to create mysteries as well. So these complex crop circles without obvious traces of humans entering or leaving the field, and it's interesting, in this article I mentioned earlier, they say that they would bring bar stools into the crop circles in order to jump over certain areas of the field, right, so they don't leave footprints and so on. But this idea that this thing appears in the crops without any traces of humans ever entering or leaving the field creates this speculation of something being larger than life. Is it aliens? Is it something paranormal? Because to achieve something like that, it needs planning, it needs thinking, it needs practice, it needs a group of people. And us as normal people, we look at the results and we're like, this is impossible. It's impossible. I cannot imagine how a group of people could achieve something like that in one night. Therefore, it must be alien or larger than life or paranormal. And I think that's the motivation. That's the motivation right there. To leave people puzzled. The idea is we want to create something that makes people question whether it is even possible. They want to push the complexity to a new level every year and do something that has never been done before to achieve this impression in people that they say this is impossible. Nobody could possibly believe that. And with that, the crop circle artists have achieved their goal. They want newspaper articles. They want people writing blog posts, making videos on YouTube saying, I've seen the crop circle. I felt the energy inside. It was an incredible experience and so on. And they create the mythicism of the crop circles being not man-made. That's the idea. That's the ambition of these people. And that's why they keep pushing themselves further and further with these incredibly complex and hard to achieve patterns that they put into the crops. And in my opinion, that's a very human trait. To create something that puzzles all the onlookers, everyone who sees it is like, that can't be man-made, right? That creates these bigger alien question marks in people's heads while you sit back in the pub, read the article over a pint and chuckle. I think that's a very human trait, and it makes a lot of sense to me that people would do that. Again, to an extent, it does come back to graffiti. And while graffiti is more about getting your name out there and getting everyone to know your name, but it is similar, right? We've seen graffiti where they paint 6, 7, 8 whole trains, like within 20 minutes. And it feels like they also want to create this moment of someone seeing it and be like, oh my, how long did that take? That's impossible. But but practice. After you've done the first big train, you've done 2 big trains, you get faster, you get better, you get more efficient, you train this. And with that, you become more ambitious when it comes to the result, and you achieve things that just a few years ago, even for yourself, seemed unachievable. So that's my theory. I think that's what it is. I think I've given you guys a fair rundown of some cases, of some examples. There's much more to talk about. I could literally talk for hours or days about this phenomenon. I genuinely recommend you guys to read this article on Physics World. It's great. There's so much more stuff. I really had to pick and choose what I talk about in this video, because in this article there are so many interesting little tidbits that they're breaking down around the phenomenon, around the backstory, about these guys coming forward and confirming that they hoax a lot of the the circles. It's a great read. So again, I'll link it in the description. They also show an example here of a crop circle that was created over 3 nights, and they found out who did it. And it is one of these structures where you're like, that's impossible, nobody could do it, but they found the guy who did it. So read this article by yourself if you want to follow up on the story. Don't forget to smash the like button if you enjoyed the video. I would greatly appreciate that. Subscribe to the channel for more, and if you want to continue the conversation, join our Discord. The link to that is down in the description. It's free to join, obviously. I'm hanging out there. It's a lovely community of like-minded people. We're not just talking about UFOs and crop circles. All kinds of things are being discussed over on the Discord. I would love to meet you there. Thanks so much for your time. Again, I hope you enjoyed the video. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next one. I'm out. Bye.